Hey everyone, this is Derek Bros of the Conscious Resistance Network, and today I'm going to share with you guys something previously unreleased related to the Finders that those of you who are diving deep down that rabbit hole might find interesting or intriguing. First, though, I'd like to remind you guys to bookmark theconsciousresistance.com to get all of our latest content, where you can follow and download my books for free. You can order shirts if you want to support. You can find conscious music. You can find essays, vlogs, interviews, etc. And if you want to follow us on Minds, Discord, Steemit, DTube, join our text list. You can also support on BitChute. People have asked about BitChute. We are on BitChute. Sign up for our email newsletter. And also, we got a little new poll here. Is there an afterlife? Just a fun poll for anybody who wants to go participate. But let's get right into this. Last year, I'd say late 2018, early 2019. No, 2018. As I was writing the Finders documentary, I had a man named Fred Burks reach out to me. What's up, Fred, if you're still watching? He runs this website, wanttoknow.info. And, you know, it seems to be kind of like conspiracy research type stuff. And, it's his place to talk about 9/11, pedophilia, a range of different things, and just like a repository of information. So Fred, also, if you want to know more about Fred, you can find out more about his, I think his background's on here. He worked as a translator, if I remember correctly, during the Bush administration. And he says he had his kind of waking up experience and decided to start questioning things around him. Here we go. Fred Burks, presidential interpreter, website manager, cover-up researcher. And you can find his bio right there if you want to know more about him. But he reached out to me and sent me the interview you're about to hear, the audio version, which is with Michael Holwell, one of the Finders members who was arrested in February 1987, which started the whole Finders scandal. This is Fred Burks talking to Michael Holwell, who he says was a friend of his, or is a friend of his, and sharing his personal story. Fred reached out to me, basically, I don't want to say he discouraged me from going further, but he essentially said, oh, you know what, I thought the Finders was there was a conspiracy, but then I realized one of my friends is involved in it, and I decided to talk to him, and we did this interview, and I realized that there's nothing to it, so I took down some stuff off my website. That's what he claims, and he sent it to me while I was making the documentary. I listened to what the interview had to say, and I looked at the information I've been able to gather and the data I put together, and I still felt like, you know what, I'm going forward with this documentary. I think Michael Holwell might be telling the truth. Maybe he just wasn't a part of the inner circle, or he is still a part of it and he's a liar. And we know that the Finders were told to pretend like they were breaking up, even if that's not the case. And also that Finders members had been threatened about speaking out. So I don't know. I'm going to leave the speculating to you guys. I just wanted to share this with me so that in the interest of transparency, all the Finders information is out there. So again, this was sent to me by Fred Burks. It's an interview with Michael Holwell, one of the Finders members. I hope you guys enjoy it. And I do want to remind you guys, if you enjoyed my Finders documentary and you want to invest in my next documentary, the 5G Trojan Horse, we are doing a crowdfunding campaign for the next 28 days. We're aiming to raise $2,000. We've got $230 raised here, and somebody else sent me a private donation of $1,000. So we're at $1,200, honestly. And if we can still get this up to $2,000, that would be amazing. That's going to pay me for my time and pay our editor and help us do promotional costs and things of that sort. So please consider investing in that. Enjoy the interview, and until next time, remember, you are powerful, you are beautiful, and you are free. Peace.
All right, hey there, this is Fred Burks and Michael Holwell, and today is September 23rd at 8:30, and Michael and I have been friends for almost 20 years, but I think I only found out about a year ago that the cult, he'd mentioned he was involved in a cult. The cult he was involved in was something called the Finders, which I had heard about and other people have asked me about. And it turns out he was even a key player in a certain incident that happened. And so we're going to talk about it and maybe sharing this with people who are interested. So Michael, maybe you could just do like a very kind of brief description of the Finders or whatever you want to just start off with.
Well, the Finders was a group of people who were were looking for an alternative way of living. Starting in the 1970s, they gathered around a kind of an eccentric sage character named Marion Petty on his property in northern Virginia, and out in the mountains near Sperryville, Virginia. He had some property, and so people would just come hang around and enjoyed the meetings and the brainstorming and the utopian idealism that Petty would talk about. So he attracted a range of people, and he would kind of hang out, and he would just invite people to start living there. Just live here, work here. throw some money in the pot now and then.
Wow.
And just started creating these, a kind of a informal community around him as a kind of a charismatic personality.
So he was really charismatic, and you said he was former military.
I believe he was U.S. Army. Yes, he was a chauffeur during the war, and he chauffeured various generals.
Wow.
Around during World War II.
Uh-huh.
And so he had his ear on certain conversations that might have been classified.
Uh-huh.
So that's where a lot of the conspiracies come from, because he was interested in like what was really going on.
Uh-huh.
And because he drove generals around, he might have been privy to some information.
So he probably knew that the world is not what we think it is.
Yes, I'm sure he had some interesting conversations while he was quietly chauffeuring people around
Right.
Washington.
Do you know what his rank was?
I believe he was a master sergeant when he retired.
Uh-huh.
And his wife, Isabel Petty, worked for the CIA in Langley.
Ah.
So that also adds to the conspiracy theories.
Right.
They say that, I don't know this, that apparently Petty could ask her to like check on things or look things up, or maybe, bring him documents if he wanted to know something. So he might have had access to some classified materials at times.
Uh-huh.
I never saw any personally myself. But
And when did you get involved?
I joined the group, when was that? 1981, when I was 18.
Mm-hmm. So it had been going for 10 years or so?
Approximately.
Yeah.
I'm not sure on the early date. There was he had set aside a piece of country property in Virginia and called it the Free State. And so people were allowed just to come there and camp and just be on the land for free and start kind of a community. So he donated the use of this 90-acre parcel just as and it was known as the Free State. And then later people started getting more organized and living in other properties. But the origins were on his rural land in Virginia.
Huh. And so you came in roughly 81?
In 81. By then, people had joined the group who had some money, and they bought an apartment complex in Northwest Washington on W Street, and they bought a warehouse in Northeast Washington. So by the time I joined, there was property in the city where most of us lived most of the time. And we would visit the country properties.
How many people were living on that property?
Well, it's hard to say because the lifestyle was highly nomadic. So Petty would call for people to move around in different groupings, sometimes in the middle of the night. So you'd be living here, and then the call comes in, okay, you 5 go move over there now.
And people would just follow whatever he said, kind of like a military thing?
He was the game caller. That was his title. And the game caller would, at any time, could like change the game and reshuffle people and reconfigure them.
Wow.
So there was about 20 adults there at the time, but who lived where was always fluid and changing.
About 20 people. And did people ever resist when he said, I want you to do this or that?
It was all based on one day at a time. So if you didn't want to play the game, you just left.
Wow.
But if you hung around, you're expected to follow orders. If you didn't want to, you just went away.
And were you working outside to pull in some income, or?
Yes. People did a lot of freelance gigs, and some people would just do cleaning jobs or landscape work or carpentry jobs or short-term gigs. We were encouraged to keep things really flexible and not become full-time employees for the most part.
Right, because he wanted you to be able to move around and do different
travel.
things.
Yeah, earn, learn, and travel was a military slogan that he wanted.
Earn, learn, and travel.
Earn, learn, and travel. So to have your bags packed at any moment, so he could say, okay, go. And you're expected to like leave in 1 hour and be on your
What's
way.
one of the more unusual ones that he had you go do?
Well, most of my travels were domestic. Other people flew overseas. There were some people on to earn and learn their way around the world.
Wow.
My travels were more like, okay, you guys load up in the van and drive over to California, from the East Coast to California, and earn and learn as you go. One of the games would be to go somewhere and he could give you $1,000 as seed money. Go somewhere, find work, double the money, and come back.
Wow.
So there were some trips to San Diego or other places in San Francisco and from Washington. Drive across the country in a van with maybe 5 or 6 people. Have an adventure. Live cheaply. And
In the van?
in the van, or we had a platform and a bed built in the van. But find places to crash. Make friends, make connections. Find the alternative people in whatever city we went to, and say, hey, can we crash with you for a while? We're these modern-day gypsies.
That's great.
And working temp jobs. And we bought computers in the early 80s when the first personal computers came out. The old K-Pro and Compaq computers. It didn't even have hard drives then.
Right, that's right. I remember,
computers. So we had those and learned how to use the WordStar and the other word processing programs. So we developed skills so we could go anywhere and sign up with Kelly or other temporary services and start making $10 or $12 an hour.
Nice.
And make money. And so it was kind of a modern day gypsy kind of a lifestyle.
Was it fun?
It was somewhat fun. It was more work than fun in my experience. But the fun part for me was the sexual part. I liked the part about sexual sharing because there was totally open sexuality.
Wow.
And it was matriarchal, so the women would do the initiating.
Oh, really? The women would initiate?
That was
wow.
the way Petty wanted it. He said, only have sex with women when they ask you to, when they invite you to, when you're invited.
Wow.
Otherwise, don't ask, don't push, just kind of...
And there wasn't much pairing up?
Women would choose their favorite, but women would sample a bunch of men and then pick one they wanted most of the time.
Okay.
So it was kind of monogamish among some women. But then he would occasionally have sex parties where he would encourage each person to try on each other one for at least a little while.
This is all pre-AIDS, right?
Yes, it was definitely pre-AIDS. When AIDS showed up, things got a little more cautious. But the idea is that we'd all be fluid sharing within the group, but not outside the group.
So that was an agreement.
It was more of an understanding that if you're going to have sex with someone outside the group, use protection. Don't jeopardize inside the group.
Wow, that's pretty wild. But then people would have kids too, right?
Yes, yeah. One woman, Paula, joined the group with an existing child who was about 4, I think. But then 6 other children were born in the group, including my son.
Wow.
Was born there.
Now, I noticed in the newspaper article it had 2 with your last name. There was a boy and a girl, I think.
They thought the daughter was mine, too, because they had the same mother. Mary was her name. Mary and John Paul had the same mother, but 2 different fathers.
Okay.
I was only the father of the youngest one.
Okay. Wow.
But they knew they were brother and sister, so they assumed I was.
So, did you actually serve as a father and mother, or was it more the whole group that was taking care of the kids?
It was more of a group thing. The kids all knew who their mothers were, but they didn't always know who their father was.
Right.
There were some women who kept it deliberately ambiguous.
Wow.
They had sex with several men, and they deliberately didn't want to know who the child was. Now, it became evident as the child grew up who the father was by physical resemblance.
Right.
But the idea was that all the men together would play the father role collectively.
Right. And what was the name of the guy who ran it?
Marion Petty, Pettie.
Marion.
And
was he also playing around sexually?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Now, right. See, there was a bit of a double standard because the women would initiate with all the other men, but Petty could initiate. He could suggest, "Hey, how about you?"
This is a little bit cultish, right? And you've said it was. You even think it was a cult.
That's where it was edgy. Yeah, he had special standards for himself that didn't apply to everyone else.
Okay.
Yes, he would call a game for us, but he would then do whatever he wanted to do.
Wow.
And all the women were I believe, physically attracted to him, so it wasn't a problem. But yeah, he would always have someone sleeping with him when he wanted to.
Did that feel unfair?
No, it felt like it was an appropriate perk for his position.
Right, because he was very charismatic. It sounds like
he was. He would laugh a lot. He was into jokes and pokes and nonsense. And sometimes he would make these wise pronouncements. Other times he would just crack jokes and have us all singing. He had us all sing songs.
Cool.
We would study Christian songs and get a Pentecostal hymnal and sing Christian songs. Even though we're not Christian, but we just like to sing.
Wow.
and people would make up songs. One of the members was a guy named Toby, whose real name was R. Gardner Terrell. You might write that down. He wrote a book about the Finders. You might want to look up.
Cool.
Terrell. He wrote a book about the Finders, which
R.
Yeah, Robert Gardner Terrell.
Okay.
Went by the name Toby in the community, but he wrote a book after he left. That is. I'm not sure if it's still. It's not in print. You could probably find it.
Interesting. Cool. And what about how are the kids raised?
Well, the idea was to raise the kids kind of in a wild way and let them with minimal intervention. Petty read a lot of books about alternative education, like Montessori and Waldorf and things.
Or now they call it unschooling. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yes, that was one of the ideas. Is not to teach them didactically, but let them learn more experientially. Put them in interesting environments. One of the ideas was to let nature teach the children. So the children grew up mostly on the country property in Virginia, and I was one of their primary caregivers.
Okay.
Myself and Danny and Stan and Bob mostly would be the ones primarily raising the children once they were weaned off their mothers.
More so than the mothers.
Well, the mothers would the idea was the mothers would raise them for the first 2-3 years mostly, and as they were weaned off the mother, then they would spend more time with the men.
Wow, interesting.
And that became kind of an issue of contention because some of the children didn't want to spend so much time away from their mothers.
Right.
Naturally.
Sure, right.
They weren't ready to join the commune at the age of 3 or something.
Right.
Like they want mommy.
Right.
So Petty's idea to wean them off their mother was very controversial, and I think it angered some of the mothers.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the weanings in particular was traumatic, and the poor girl cried, and the men could not console her, and
Wow.
she wanted her mother. So when the children became of that age, around 2, 3, 4. It created a schism in the community.
Oh, really?
The
Wow.
mothers versus Petty, and
Wow.
that was the kind of the beginning of the end. There was tension there because
Uh-huh.
the mothers wanted to nurture and love them, and Petty was like, "Oh, let him play with rocks and frogs and sleep on the ground." And
He wanted them to be tough, right?
kind of like little soldiers,
Right.
or something.
Huh.
And the mothers wanted to be nurturing and so it created a sense of disagreement around parenting as the kids became older.
Uh-huh.
So by the time all the shit hit the fan in Tallahassee, there was already some anger, and the mothers were just looking for a reason to leave.
Oh, so did it kind of break up after that, the whole group?
Well, no, most of the mothers left,
Uh-huh.
but then the remaining people stayed with Petty.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, most of the mothers took their kids and left and actually came to the Bay Area and
Wow.
settled in Albany.
Oh, really?
They
Wow.
created a group. 3 of the mothers and their kids created a group house in Albany.
Wow, how cool.
And and so most of the kids went to Albany High School and kind of became normal kids.
Right.
Commune upbringing and a normal suburban life in Albany, California later.
Right. And where did the name Finders come from? Do you know?
That was one of our original business cards. It said, "Finders, we find ... persons, places, things, ideas, organizations." Like we're researchers. This is before the internet, or
Right,
it was
right.
and so we were good at like looking things up with some of the early databases
Uh-huh.
and finding things and doing networking and connecting people. That was like one of our shticks. One of the apartments was called the Problem Solving Center, and that was advertised: "Come into the Problem Solving Center. We'll help you solve your problems.
Cool.
Find what you're looking for, whether it's housing or work or relationship or a different life." And people would come through, and if we liked them, we might invite them to live with us and say, "Well, hang out here." So it was like an intake place for people to find us.
Cool. That's great.
So at one point, Finders actually had a listing in the directory of intentional communities.
Oh, wow. Huh.
And Jeff Cosney visited us.
Oh, wow. All right.
And interviewed us.
Yeah,
at one
cool.
point. So, but for a long time, you had to use more like serendipity to find the finders.
Did they have other locations around the country, around the world?
Yes, at one time we'd rent houses in San Francisco. I lived in one for a time. There was an apartment in Los Angeles. There was an apartment in New York for a short time.
Other countries?
Only on a short-term basis.
Uh-huh.
People would sometimes travel to places like Hong Kong. A couple of the people that were closest to Petty were good at writing, so they would get freelance writing gigs.
Oh, nice.
And you could look up some names. Steve Usdin, USDIN. He has a lot of articles on high tech. Jeff Ubois, UBOIS. He also is a tech writer. They got their start in the Finders.
Wow, cool.
They were like 18, 19 years old when they joined,
Wow.
and they learned how to write and edit and research, and they became writers. And in fact, one of the Finders, Carolyn Said, is a writer now for the San Francisco Chronicle.
Oh, wow, cool.
So they got their start at the Finders. Now they might not like me saying that because they don't want to be known as
Right.
former cult members.
Right.
So you might keep that confidential, but
Right.
but some of them are very successful writers from what they learned.
Now, did you consider it a cult when you were in it?
No, I thought it was a utopian
Community.
prototype,
Uh-huh.
and that Petty would teach kind of an apocalyptic vision that it's all going to fall apart,
Mm-hmm.
and there's going to be a Great Depression. 1990 was a book that was written around that time. There's going to be a big economic collapse. There's going to be chaos in the streets. There's going to be rioting and anarchy. And the people who survive are the ones who are well organized, like in a tribal way, and will survive that upheaval, and then our ideas will then maybe become more mainstream once everything falls apart.
So he was really preparing a little community to survive the apocalypse, basically.
Yeah. He said that the well-organized ones will survive.
Interesting.
He said when the dinosaurs start falling around us, we're the little mammals that will survive.
Wow,
Until
interesting.
the dinosaurs die out. Kind
Very
of that
interesting.
analogy. Yeah,
Wow.
so it was this kind of an apocalyptic survivalist cult.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how was your relationship with your son?
Oh, what a sweet boy. Yeah. I totally loved him. And now, he was mostly raised by his mother, but I would, like, visit. I was the visiting dad somewhat. You know,
Mm-hmm.
she was with him all the time, of course. I would visit, like, on weekends. Occasionally we all lived together, but for the most part, Petty did not want us living as couples.
Mm.
He wanted the women over here, the men over there, wherever that was, it would change,
Mm.
and then visit each other
Mm.
for like a day or two. Petty thought that if women and men spend too much time around each other, they start to despise each other.
And is that true for him?
But, yeah, he would keep moving. He would not stay in the same place
He wouldn't stay with the same woman
more
very
than
long?
about 3 days.
Wow.
Every 3 days or so, he would relocate himself.
Wow.
And there were several different properties he would kind of move around to.
Uh-huh.
There was the W Street in Washington. There was 4th Street, and that was a commercial warehouse in Northeast Washington. There was an apartment building in Roslyn, Virginia, Northern Virginia. He would move around from place to place.
Interesting. Would you say he was a little paranoid?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
He was, somewhat.
Was he paranoid even with you guys sometimes?
He would say things like, "Oh, you guys are all going to turn on me at some point." He would get kind of despondent sometimes. "Yeah, you all are going to betray me, and you're all going to leave at some point." And we'd say, "No, we're going to stay with you forever." It was reverse psychology. I later realized he would kind of like encourage us to leave, and then we'd want to stay more.
Ah, smart. Yes, that's very smart.
He knew his psychology.
Right.
He knew if he came down too hard, we would leave. So if he pushed us out the door, we'd want to stay.
So do you think there's a way that he was kind of manipulating you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And is that part of why you later came to see it as a cult?
Yeah, there was a sense of being a benevolent dictator and using manipulation tactics.
Mm-hmm.
Never any threats of overt violence.
Mm-hmm.
Never violence, but manipulation. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And he would say it's for your own good, kind of thing.
Sure.
Like he was benevolent. I'm doing all this stuff to you, but you'll thank me for it someday.
Right.
Kind of a fatherly type.
And was he right most of the time?
Well, he's right that most of the people did leave.
Right.
But not for the reasons he thought. But
Right.
although a loyal group did stay with him until he died.
Wow.
He had some of the finders stayed with him until he passed away. He died of cancer in 2004, I believe.
Oh, really? So they were with him for like 30 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Some of the core people, after the women and children left, there was a core group that stayed with him until he passed. He was born in 12/12/20, I believe. He lived to be almost 84.
Wow. Uh-huh.
He said that the whole time. He said, "I'm going to live to be 84." And
Oh, really?
And he did.
Wow.
So he had insights or intuitions like that.
Interesting.
That were very impressive.
Right.
He knew things, and no one knew how did he know that. It's
Right,
kind of
to
stupid.
predict your death, that's a pretty big thing.
Advanced souls can do that, apparently. Yeah, he had some advanced features.
Did he have any sort of, I'm curious, any communications with, I don't know, spirits, aliens, anything like that you knew of?
Not that I know of. And if he did, he would have probably rephrased it as this spirit told me. He would refer to the Great Spirit, like the Indians do. The Great Spirit talked to me last night, he would say. It kind of gave him an image or a vision or a download, and he would then pass on bits and pieces of it.
And did you ever think or suspect that he was working with somebody or some group?
No.
Really,
No.
he was just on his own.
He was a solo, eccentric charismatic
Genius.
Yeah.
Charismatic genius.
Exactly. Yeah, he would occasionally travel, because as retired military, he could fly on a military plane anywhere to any military base in the world.
Oh, wow.
So he would go to Greece sometimes, he would go to Japan. Wherever there was a base, he could just grab a flight out of Andrews Air Force Base in Washington and just go somewhere for free.
Because
he liked to travel.
But I mean, the military gave, because he had time in the military and he was close.
That's a benefit.
Okay,
if you're retired military, you can fly on a military plane if there's space available.
Right.
It's not comfortable, I guess. It's a military flight, but you can just pop on the plane and he'd go. I don't even know all the places he went to, but he would just go around the world. And
on his own, or would he take somebody with him?
On his own, usually.
Really? Wow. Huh.
He liked to travel. And
so he's really independent.
And no one ever knew when he was going to do that. He would give no notice.
Wow.
He'd wake up in the morning. He lived up in the attic. The W Street house had twin attics above. It was an 8-unit apartment building. There was an attic on each side, and he would just disappear. And so we'd come upstairs, and Petty's gone.
Wow.
No one knew where he was, or when he was coming back.
Right.
So he kept us all off balance that way.
Right. That's kind of smart. And why did you leave?
after the fiasco in Tallahassee when the kids were taken, and Danny and I spent 40 days in jail. That
40 days.
40 days in jail.
I didn't realize you were in jail that long. Wow.
I was in jail for 40 days. They offered us a plea bargain at one point when it
Mm-hmm.
became clear that this was just a harmless group of eccentrics.
Mm-hmm.
They offered Danny and I a plea bargain. Initially, there were 6 charges of child neglect,
Mm-hmm.
misdemeanor child neglect. The charges were eventually dismissed. They let us go.
Wow.
But yeah, it took 40 days to figure out that they were harmless.
Wow.
In the meantime, they searched all the properties, grabbed all the documents, all the computers, went through everything. Realized,
But do you know what the people talk about, that what happened? Why did they think it's very strange? That apparently the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington was doing an investigation. FBI was involved, and at some point the CIA stepped in, took all the files, and said it's an internal matter, leave it alone. Did you ever hear that?
No, I didn't know that part.
So apparently he had some kind of protection, or the CIA somehow. Maybe it's because of his wife, huh? That they stepped in. And
There could have been some documents from the CIA in our collection. We had a big library.
Mm-hmm.
There was thousands of books and boxes of papers. I never saw all of them. So
Mm-hmm.
who knows what they found in those boxes?
Right. Well, let's jump into some of the more controversial stuff then. Kind of, you get a
Sure.
beautiful picture there.
Sure.
So, what happened in Tallahassee?
Well, it was one of those utopian ideas that didn't work very well. Petty called a game. We're all in Washington, D.C. It's wintertime. It's January.
Mm-hmm.
So it's getting cold. So he said, okay, have all the children and some of the men drive across country, drive to Florida first, and then drive across country and along the southern part of the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
Have all the mothers fly out to San Francisco separately and set up a home and be ready, to get jobs and all that. And then at some point, the men and the children will meet up with the mothers, and we'll all have a nice time in California.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we never got to California, of course, because of course
It was just 2 of you?
no, there were actually the 2 of us who were arrested, plus a second van with 3 or 4 other men from the finders. So there were actually 2 vans traveling together. The other 3 or 4 men were in Tallahassee looking for work. Well, Danny and I were on a camping trip with the kids, because the idea was to have the kids be in nature. So we were in some kind of a state park outside of Tallahassee, and living kind of this kind of babysitting, babysitting I believe there
6 kids you had, is what they said.
Yeah, there was Mary and Max and Ben and BB and Honeybee and John Paul. My son was the youngest. Yeah, there were 6, and. So we were camping and eating simple foods, mostly fruits and vegetables and bread, basic stuff, and milk. And, we were camping out, and for I guess maybe a week or so, and then it was time and we decided, well, let's go into town today, give the kids a little change. There might have been a sense of these 2 men are going to meet up in the park, the other van will meet, and then we'll switch places. And then the other men will go out to the woods with the kids, and these 2 guys will get a job, or there's
something going on like that.
Some plan to meet in the city at this park. Well, that meeting never happened, because when Danny and I were in the park, the kids were all running around and just being kids. And some neighbor of the park saw that and said, "This is weird," and they called the police.
Right.
So that's how it happened. But the kids had been camping, so they were dirty, and they had bug bites and scratches on their skin, and they looked messy. I admit that. They didn't look like your typical clean, brand new.
And they're running all over, and it's just 2 men. And what they said is you guys were dressed up in suits.
That was the finder's outfit. The men almost always wore suits, like kind of like the suit that, like an elevator guy would, operator would wear, like the blue blazer and the gray slacks and the tie.
So most of the time, even when you're not traveling and stuff, you'd be wearing that?
Yeah, the idea is to be fairly well dressed, not crazy, but be reasonably well dressed, have a nice appearance. The problem is that well dressed mode didn't fit that setting.
Especially with the kids being so dirty, it's looking really strange. I could see where it looks strange.
The contrast was weird. The idea, Petty's idea, was to present ourselves as teachers. We're teachers, and we have a school on wheels, basically. We're a mobile school for these kids who are being unschooled.
Well, and there was a story about going down to Mexico for a school or something too.
That was one of the ideas, that when we met up with the mothers, we might actually go to Mexico and spend time in Baja on the beach or something. But that was the wrong thing to say to the police.
So go to Mexico.
The wrong thing to say. You're crossing an international boundary. That brought up all their red flags. Like, oh my God, they're kidnapping them. It's like, no, we just want to go have a nice warm place to hang
Right,
out
but
in the
of course
winter.
they're suspicious, right?
Right. So then they brought in Interpol, and there's all this nonsense.
Wow.
Interpol investigated us too. It's like, no, it's not illegal to go
So
to
did
Mexico.
did Petty, like when you guys were in jail, was he trying to help out at all?
He was monitoring the situation remotely, but he did not communicate directly with me when I was in jail. But there was a sense that he's aware of, he's monitoring, but there's really nothing he could do.
The moms were pretty upset, though. It sounds like.
Yeah, they basically most of the moms at that point basically stopped referring to Petty as the leader. At that point, they basically said, "No, you're not our game caller anymore."
What did they do with the kids?
The kids were all put into foster care.
Wow, for 40 days.
And Florida has gnarly foster care.
Wow.
The youngest 4 children were released fairly quickly. The 2 oldest ones
Released to their
mothers.
mothers.
To their mothers. The 2 oldest ones were held because they were supposed to be in school. They were, I think, 6 and 5, or something. They were old enough they should have been in school according to the law, and they were not. We didn't have any paperwork saying they were exempt, so those 2 mothers had to actually move to Tallahassee, set up a home, receive visits from the state to prove they were fit mothers. And that took a couple of months to get those 2 kids back, including.
So they were all pissed.
They were, yeah. They were like, well, this. There was anger, sure, and so one of those mothers was the mother of my son, Paula. She set up a home, and she actually decided to stay in Tallahassee, and she's still there.
Oh, to this day.
She bought a trailer outside of Tallahassee, and that's her home to this day. She likes it there.
Wow. And do you have any connection with her?
We talk, or okay, very rarely. We're friends on Facebook. Yeah, we've gone our separate ways.
And where's your son?
My son now lives in Oakland.
Oh, wow. Cool. So you see him occasionally?
I do, yeah. He manages a restaurant. He went to UC Santa Cruz.
Wow.
He's got a degree in theater. He's a regular guy. You'd never know he was in the college. And he has no memories because he was only 2 when his mom left. The older girl lives in, I think, Sonoma County. And she has more memories because she was 6 when all that happened.
Right. Wow.
Or 7, or, yeah, she was older.
And so... let's see. They said that basically once they arrested you guys, they got some search warrants and they did some searches of like the warehouse and all that kind of stuff.
They searched all the properties, and they even, one of our neighbors in little town of Etlan, 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 Virginia, this little tiny town. The neighbors of ours there thought we're up to some no good stuff. These are like good Christian folk, and these weirdos who come and go at all hours of the night.
Right.
And so they said, and so those neighbors told the cops, "Oh yeah, them weird people have like bodies buried out there and stuff."
Oh really?
So the authorities brought in a backhoe to dig up the yard looking for the dead bodies. I mean, so a lot of the rumors were spawned by our neighbors who thought we must be up to no good. All these strange city folks coming and going.
But one of the things they found was a photo album entitled "The Execution of Henrietta and Igor."
Right, those were our goats. Those were our pet goats. That was a theatrical thing. We did keep 2 goats over a summer, and then it was time to. They're not going to survive the winter because we're not around all the time. So we killed them and ate them. We ate the goats, which is a legal thing to do. But the 2 men, Danny and Stan, who did that, decided to do a little dress up fun thing and make it an experience for the children. Like here's these 3 and 4 and 5-year-old kids. We're going to show you what happens to animals before you eat them. This is education. You eat meat, right? Well, this is how meat is made. You kill an animal. So it was educational, but they did it in a fun way. He put on this executioner's mask, and one of the men, wrote these little commentaries on each picture. Stan, gives the death sentence, or
oh wow,
it was in fun. But
they took it all as this is some satanic ritual.
Right, it was not. It was it was a classroom experience for the children. And we did eat their goat meat. We did eat the meat. But yeah, the whole satanic thing was like, no, killing animals and eating them is not satanic. It's just what people do all the time.
Right. But you may have even said something like a blood ritual, because they mentioned something about finding. You don't remember anything about that?
There was no. I don't believe the term blood ritual was used on any of the photos. No.
Okay. Yeah.
It was all meant in fun and theater.
And one of the things they claim is that there were sex orgies involving children.
Not true. Not true. The children were never involved.
Huh.
And the orgies were pretty lightweight. It's like, a little oral sex, a little intercourse, and we're all done. It was, but because we're all in the same room together, I guess that is an orgy.
Were the children in the room?
No.
Okay.
Of course
but,
not.
Right. Yeah.
These are all just rumors. People just made stuff up.
Uh-huh. So let me just a couple of comments from the reports, and I just love to get your hit on them. It says it was noted in a customs report that the children, when you guys were arrested, were unable to accurately identify themselves or their custodians, and they could not identify the purpose of telephones, toilets, or televisions, and were only given food as a reward.
Nonsense. The two oldest children were Mary and Max, and they would make up stories, probably trying to get sympathy so they could get some candy. Their diet was somewhat strict. We did not give the children junk food, and I suspect that they made up some stories because they said, "Oh, maybe these people will give us some junk food." If they say that they only gave us raw potatoes, which is what Mary said, they only feed us raw potatoes.
Wow.
That's not true, but she was trying to get sympathy, so they'd give her a hamburger.
Wow. Wow.
So, in fact, some of the kids said they really liked their food in foster care better than the food that the finders gave them.
Right.
Because we fed them mostly fruits and vegetables and milk and bread.
The healthy stuff that kids don't like.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when they saw, oh, you guys are going to give us, chips and candy, well, let's embellish the stories. So.
Okay, so and the next one. This is also as a result of the warrant. They said cursory examination of the documents, and it's cursory notice, revealed detailed instructions for obtaining children for unspecified purposes. The instructions included the impregnation of female members of the community known as the finders, purchasing children, trading, and kidnapping.
Nonsense.
Yeah?
Nonsense. The only partial shred of truth to that could be that there might have been some discussions and emails about who wants to know who the father is and who wants to just select several men to have sex with during their fertile time and let God decide, or let randomness decide who the father is.
Mm-hmm.
So some women chose, like Paula and I know that we're the father of John Paul.
Mm-hmm.
But other women said, oh yeah, I'll invite these three men in, and one of them will become the father.
Mm-hmm.
But those are not instructions.
No, that's not like choosing to impregnate somebody.
But it would only be our own members, because there was a lot of email back and forth. We used MCI mail, and there was a lot of email about, is it time to have children? Who wants to have them? When? Who do they want their fathers to be? So these were emails among the women, and maybe with Petty offering his opinion.
Interesting, and I can see people who come from a pretty conservative background are going, "This is something weird is going on."
People don't usually send emails just asking who's going to be the father of my child.
Right.
That is weird.
Right.
But it's not. It's nothing criminal. It's just people being weird.
Yep. Okay, and one of the things they mentioned is let me see if I can find it here, about kids being ordered from China or Hong Kong or something like that. And that they found some documents saying something like that.
During a trip to Japan, some of the members befriended a Japanese family and invited him to send his teenage son to be with us as a cultural exchange.
Okay.
So there were emails back and forth to Japan saying, would you like to have your son visit us? He did come visit. The visit did not go well because he hardly spoke a word of English. And he didn't like being in America, and so he went back to Japan.
Okay. I just found it. It's one telex. It says specifically ordered the purchase of 2 children in Hong Kong to be arranged through a contact in the Chinese embassy there.
Nonsense.
You don't know anything about
Nonsense. There were never any Chinese children there. No, the children are not purchased. Children were conceived in the group. Or you might have children visiting from our friends overseas. But no, there was no purchasing of children.
Mm-hmm. And I know you told me once in the past that because there's a note here in the Washington City paper, it says, townspeople say the finders constantly walk the streets, following people home and taking extensive notes and pictures. They often appear at local council meetings, never saying a word, but simply observing the scene.
That was true in the town of Culpeper, Virginia, where the finders had a house and an office, I believe, in the downtown area. I was not part of that group so much, but there was, Petty wanted to map the entire town of Culpeper, put big maps up on the walls and every property, because he was considering investing a fair amount of money in buying buildings in the town. He thought Culpeper would be a good investment. But before Petty buys property, he wants to study the town. So it was a real estate study, basically. And and a kind of a study in how does a small town work.
Right.
So go to the meetings, take notes. Petty's nickname was the student. Here's a 60-some-year-old man who calls himself a student. He wants to learn about everything.
Right.
And he was raised in Culpeper. That's his hometown.
Oh, interesting. But I could see people thinking it's strange because you guys are dressed nicely in these suits and kind of walking around and figuring things out.
It was strange. It was quite strange, and I think Petty liked the idea that we're kind of, freaking out the town. I think he kind of enjoyed that. He got some pleasure out of freaking out the townspeople. Yeah.
So he liked being eccentric.
He did. He did like being eccentric, and I don't know his history. He was, I believe, he was born and raised in that area, around that area. So, yeah, he had his own reasons for studying Culpeper.
So really, the whole Finders thing was basically his brainchild, and he was just dynamic and charismatic enough that he drew these people together and got to play this game.
Yeah, and he liked to stir things up. And parking a van in front of someone's house for 24 hours with tinted windows and kind of spying on them, he enjoyed that for some reason.
Wow.
Completely harmless, but it was perhaps intimidating.
Right.
And people don't like having strange vehicles with people inside parked in front of their houses or offices.
And did you ever think there might be ulterior motives on any of the stuff he did?
No. I just thought he was either trying to keep track of friends from his childhood, or the military. I knew he did want to keep tabs on some people he was in the army with, who are now retired in their 60s. So he would send some of his people over to interview them, and just he wanted to keep tabs of people as they went through life, not in any kind of a malicious way.
Interesting.
I think he was mainly just curious. Well, how did that guy from I was in the army with 40 years ago? How did he turn out? Wow. How did his life go?
Wow.
He was keeping tabs on his childhood friends, perhaps adversaries. He might have had other reasons for keeping track of people.
And was he ever married or have kids?
He was married to Isabel Petty. He had 2 children, Dave and George.
And were they a part of the scene?
Oh, somewhat. They were around during the early days. I think David was more community-minded. George was more straight-laced. And some of them inherited some of the property.
And Isabel?
Isabel passed away earlier in life. I never met her.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, she died fairly young. Dave Petty was married and had kids, and he eventually moved to Maui, and he died of cancer.
Oh, wow.
Apparently cancer ran in that family because both David and Isabel died fairly young.
Wow. Huh. What a trip.
And I met David's son. What's his name? There's David's son's something Petty still lives in Maui to this day.
Oh, wow.
And I got to meet him, and he was really neat. He wanted to hear stories about his grandfather because he had never met.
Interesting.
Yeah. So there are some Pettys.
So you keep in contact with some of these folks?
Very rarely.
Yeah.
Bob Meyer was my closest friend, kind of an older brother to me in the commune. He's still around. He lives in Albany to this day, and so I'm in touch with him occasionally.
And what was it that caused you to leave?
Well, once Paula took the 2 kids, took Mary and John Paul, and left, that kind of took the heart out of it for me. I stayed, though. I did stay for another 2 years after all that happened. But I was kind of lost. I said, okay, this isn't really working out. We're not the prototype of the future here. This thing is kind of falling apart. So I stayed, seeing if it would get better, but it didn't. And so I eventually, Petty sent me on a trip to go visit my son with his mother and sister in Tallahassee. And I never came back.
So you stayed in Tallahassee for a while?
For a little while, and then I said, I don't really want to go back there. There's really nothing there for me. So so Paula agreed that by that time, I think John Paul was 5, 6, something. She agreed to let John Paul spend summers with me.
Oh, sweet.
In Albany with the other former fighters.
Oh, nice. Nice.
So I took a train ride across country, and I took John Paul to California.
Nice.
And since then, that was 1990, I think. Since then, John Paul spent summers and Christmas holidays with me, and then we'd fly him back to Tallahassee to be with his mother during the school year.
Nice.
And then when it was time for high school, he came out and lived with me full time and would visit his mother. So we took turns in that way.
Cool.
And all the kids, as far as I know, turned out to be straight-laced, normal.
Wow, isn't that interesting? Yeah.
People. Now, with many of them have kids of their own.
Well, any other wild stories or something that just comes to mind that you want to share before we conclude the interview?
One thing that was interesting was in terms of this whole survival school concept is Petty would have us sometimes pretend to be homeless. We have all this property. It's kind of funny. He'd say, okay, everyone just go survive. You're not allowed at any of the properties. Just go to the homeless shelters. Go survive for a while until I tell you to come back.
Wow.
So I spent time at homeless shelters.
How was that?
And that was frightening.
Yeah.
Frightening. One time there was snow on the building, and he had us all go out and sleep on the roof because W Street had a flat roof. Both buildings had flat roofs, and sleep outside on the snow with no bedding.
Whoa!
Just put on like a lot of clothing, wear 3 coats, hat, gloves, and sleep on the snow. And we did.
Did you actually fall asleep?
Yeah, I was able to sleep.
Wow.
Because he wanted us to have a sense of what it's like to be homeless.
Wow.
There was a sense of some survival training here and there. In the warehouse, we didn't have any beds. We slept on the floor.
Wow.
A concrete floor.
Hard concrete floor,
Yeah.
no padding.
One thin layer of carpet.
Wow.
Yeah, and we could do it.
Wow.
So
Yeah, if you did every night, I guess you get used to it, but...
the idea was to stay kind of tough. Take cold showers. Sometimes on the roof with a hose that has ice in it. Break up the ice and take a very short, freezing cold shower.
Ouch!
He liked to watch TV shows like Riley, Ace of Spies, about the British spy. Anyway, so he had us study what he called tradecraft. Just learn how spies do things. It's useful stuff. And he was intrigued by spycraft. And so we had books on it, and we'd practice sometimes training missions that were spy-like.
Oh, really?
So I think that was part of what was going on in Culpeper. He was training. He had an inner team of like 4 or 5 men who were closest to him, and he'd send them. He was kind of training them to practice their spycraft.
Wow.
So doing some of that stuff like surveillance and all that was. He wanted to have a sense that we knew how to do some of that work.
Interesting.
It was more like just practice.
Huh.
As far as I know.
Right.
But I was not one of his inner circle.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm not sure everything they talked about, but I did see some of their reports and spycraft things. It seemed like it was practice.
Cool.
Again, practicing for the for the day when it all falls apart and we have to really know this stuff to survive.
Right. I grew up with that too. My dad was always preaching to me that the world's going to fall apart, but we didn't prepare for it. Yeah.
Back when the United States went off the gold standard, I think during the Nixon administration, a lot of people thought, well, if there's nothing backing the money is going to become worthless. They thought we were going to become like another Weimar Republic with massive inflation and worthless currency.
Yep.
Which somehow didn't happen, which is kind of surprising. So a lot of folks thought the end was near back in the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
Somehow we survived it all. But I look back at my finder's years as kind of a college education where I didn't have to pay any tuition.
Nice. Yeah.
I was there about 9 years, and it was a good education. I learned some skills, and I still have an idealism about community.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I know, because most people tend to lose that as they get older.
Yeah, and one reason why I'm drawn to Amara is she lives part-time in La Akea community.
Mm-hmm.
And I might want to live there someday.
Yeah, it's a cool
part-time.
place. Yeah.
So I still have communal ideals that stay with me.
Nice.
So I'm grateful for the Finders for kind of helping me think in terms of what is the ideal, what is the utopian ideal here, and to aspire to live a more perfect kind of life.
Well, you and I met back in '99 or 2000 through Sacred Connections, which is a community sort of. We didn't live together, but it was.
I felt very at home there.
Yeah,
like, well, this is nice. It's only an occasional weekend, but it's a start.
Yeah, and this is why I was actually floored because you had told me once. I'm going to guess maybe 8-10 years ago that you were involved in a cult, and back then I probably didn't even know about it. But then I learned about it, and when I asked you a year ago or so, and you said, "Oh, it was." What was it called? You said the Finders. The Finders. Like, whoa.
Yeah. If you had met them back in the '80s, you might have joined for a while.
Maybe it sounds like it was wild.
Yeah. People who were dropped out of college, were looking for something different. Yeah.
Right.
So some of the members had been going to college for a while, dropped out, were kind of at loose ends.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'll do this for a while. And
Right.
they might stay 5 or 10 years.
Wow. Yeah.
And so it certainly attracted people who were disenchanted with the way most people live.
Right.
Looking for something different.
Well, thank you very much, Michael, and I hope this is useful to whoever might end up listening to it.
I hope so too. And the utopian ideas continue to propagate.
That's right. All right. Thanks a lot.
Well, that was fun.
How do I turn this off? There we go.